This video is going to be about wet sand and polishing sealer, specifically spar urethane, and whether or not you can wet sand and polish spar urethane. If you can wet sand and polish spar urethane, you should be able to wet sand and polish pretty much anything. The coloring agents that I ended up using on this project was the Keda Dye Crimson Red, the Keda Dye Cold Black, both liquid alcohol-based dyes, and I mixed them into the denatured alcohol and created an alcohol-based dye stain. Here I'm just trying to show the orange peel before I end up starting the sand process. I'm going to be putting together another video with the entire process for how I built it, how I colored it, the seal work I did, just pretty much everything, but that's going to be another video if you're interested in that. The long story short on this piece here is that this is a custom built shift knob that I'm trying to build for my daughter. She has a red car, so I wanted to end up creating a red shift knob for her. And on my very last application of the spar urethane, it's been very humid here in Wisconsin. I have a dehumidifier in my workshop, but I don't think it drew out the moisture as much as I wanted it to. Here's the 2000 grit sandpaper. I'm going to start out with the 2000 grit sandpaper and try to work my way around this piece. But I think what happened was that the moisture had kind of built up around this gear shift knob, and when I went to put on my last coat, other than it being a little bit heavier, I think there was a little bit of moisture that was built up on the surface, so that created some of that orange peel as well as it grabbing some of the moisture from the air. So I started out with the 2000 grit. It wasn't being aggressive enough. You can see there that it just wasn't cutting as much as I wanted it to, so I transitioned down to the 1500 grit sandpaper. Again, just starting it with the dry sand process. I want to go around the entire piece, smooth out the orange peel as well as I can, and just smooth everything out before I start the wet sanding and the polishing process. Now here I'm going to be doing the 2000 grit sandpaper and just going around the entire piece. The solution that I ended up using for my wet sanding process is just warm water with some laundry detergent. You can end up using dish detergent. I just went with laundry detergent. It just seemed to work out pretty fine for me. I mean, it's pretty much the same principle, but I ended up going around the entire project with the 2000 grit. It looks like it's turning out fairly well, so I'm going to transition into the 3000 grit right here. This is a stain additive from Keda Dye it's in testing and prototyping stages right now. I think it's going to be a pretty useful product, especially for this wet sanding process. I just, tried it out on this. It's supposed to be an additive for the dye stain, but I just put like a drop on the wet sandpaper, and it allowed me to keep my sandpaper on the surface of the sealer at least 2 to 3 times longer. It just slid very nicely, prevented clogs on my sandpaper, and really just doubled my cutting power. But that'll be another video. Again, that'll probably be coming out late 2018, maybe early 2019. But the reason I chose spar urethane in the first place, like I had mentioned, that I am in Wisconsin, and there's going to be a lot of temperature fluctuation with this shift knob being in a car. Wisconsin winters get very cold. It's going to end up contracting the wood, and then when you turn on your heater, it's going to expand. So I had a little bit of concern about cracking of the sealer. I could have probably went with just lacquer or shellac. I'm going to be doing a couple of these shift knobs for her, so I wanted to have a little bit of variation, and this one was with the spar urethane, so this is the first one. When I did the research on wet sanding and polishing spar urethane, there was a lot of varied opinions on it. There's a lot of people that said you cannot wet sand and polish spar urethane, that you're going to end up melting it and burning through it, chipping it out. Some guys that said no, you can do it, it'll be just fine. So I decided, well, the only way I'm going to truly find out is whether I do it myself or not. So at this point, I didn't have much to lose. I just wanted to try to clean this up. I had a lot of time already invested into it, so I didn't want to lose my color work because it turned out just beautiful. And I decided I was going to give it a try. Here I'm just taking the stain additive and I'm going around the entire piece. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to see what it's going to look like when it's polished out. I want to make sure that there's no defects still left in the sealer from the wet sand process. I don't want to have any swirls or curly cues, or it's just where the sealer ends up getting gummed up into the sandpaper and can create these little swirls. And there was nothing. It looked really good. So I was ready. I also wanted to make sure that there wasn't deeper scratches left over from the 2000 grit. Now, if I was working with a lacquer, I would probably went from the 2000 grit to the 2500 grit, then to the 3000 grit. But because the spar urethane is a little bit long in the oil, it's a little softer, that I decided that going with from 2000 to 3000 grit, I would be just fine, just because it is a softer polymer that it should end up taking out the scratches pretty easily. So here I'm just removing any of the debris that's left over. In the video where I end up making it, you'll see that there's a groove there, so I was just cleaning that out. This is my test piece. I ended up just doing that top surface where my thumb is, and I ended up doing the color work on it, and I sprayed it out with the spar urethane. I did have some chips up on the surface, but that's because I didn't seal the piece entirely. So, and it also had a sharp corner on it, so the wheel caught on it and it did chip it out. But I thought with my shift knob being round, I would be fine. Here I'm just dressing my wheel. I take a board and I'm trying to get the deep, the old rouge that's in the more of the center part of the wheel, and I'm trying to lift it and bring it to the surface and then just redress it. And now I'm just kind of showing off here. I got very sharp. I got my wood lathe knives pretty sharp, so instead of going back to the other section of my workshop and grabbing a scissors, my wood lathe is just right to the left of this. So I just grab my wood lathe knife and cut the loose strings off. Now I'm checking to make sure that there's no loose strings there, not something that could be sticking out longer than the other strings that are on the wheel, so that way I'm not getting some rogue wheel whip marks and stuff like that. I cross my fingers, I say a little prayer, and I begin my polishing process. Now, going into this, my plan was that I wanted to keep the piece moving on the wheel. I didn't want to keep it in one spot for too long. I didn't want to heat up the spar urethane in the polish process. I thought of it kind of like polishing a resin or a soft plastic or a polymer, which I don't have a whole lot of experience with. So if somebody has a compound or a rouge that's going to work better than what I've done in this video, please leave it in the description, just in case somebody comes through and they end up are looking at this video, that they can go down through the description, and if there is a better compound that would work for a soft plastic or polymer, that at least somebody will have another option. Again, this is just what I did, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with polishing spar urethane on the buffing wheel. I do have a lot of experience with wet sand and polishing lacquer and shellac, true oil, many other sealers, but typically I don't ever need to really do the wet sand and polish process on the spar urethane. So I'm just going around the entire piece with the white compound, and I'm going to end up going and transitioning over into the blue compound. That'll be coming up later in the video. This area here, if you can look in the reflection, like right there, you're going to see that there's a ring, that light ring. And what that is that's a magnifying glass that has a lit up ring underneath it. So I'm looking down through this magnifying glass to see if I can see any other defects in that sealer. Then I'm just checking it with my naked eye and bring it back underneath the magnifying glass. Now, I did see some micro scratches left. I didn't let that white rouge dry fully, so I was a little bit concerned about that. I wasn't sure if the blue compound was going to be able to get it out, and I wasn't sure if it was just the compound itself that was left on. So I brought it back to the other section of my workshop. I cleaned it up a little bit better, at least I tried to, and just brought it underneath the other light, and I'm looking at it with my naked eye here and just trying to see what I need to really focus on my next buffing process or my polishing process. There I'm trying to show the micro scratches that I can see. Again, the camera's not picking it up very well, just like it's not showing how deep this finish really looks. The best way that I can describe it is that the spar urethane looks like when you end up polishing it, it looks like a low gloss sealer with the clarity of the high gloss sealer. When they end up flattening or creating a low gloss sealer, what they'll typically do is they'll take like a flattening agent that has like the texture of cornstarch, and they'll take that flattening agent and they'll add it into the high gloss sealer. They'll mix it in well so it's all the way through. Now that will reduce the gloss level of your sealer, but typically what ends up happening is that it also creates a slightly cloudy effect in your sealer. So the best way that I can describe what this looks like is that it has the clarity of a high gloss sealer where there's no flattening agent that's been added, but it still has the gloss level of a slightly more glossy than a high gloss or a low gloss sealer. Not as flat as a flat sealer. So it's kind of between a high gloss and a low gloss sealer with the clarity of the high gloss. I hope that makes sense. So I know that this cut in really well. What I did with the blue polish compound is I dressed my wheel, and then I put the blue compound on fairly heavy, and then I let it dry. I walked away. I went back to my workshop, another area of my workshop, and just did some more work and let that blue compound really dry very good on my wheel. I wanted it to act more like an abrasive, and a very gentle abrasive, and I thought letting it dry like that was going to end up helping that out and work pretty well. When I did start the polishing process, a little bit of dust came off, but it wasn't anything bad at all. Again, I'm just trying to keep it moving around. I don't want it to get hot. And with the blue compound, it took a little bit longer to do, but it really wasn't too bad at all. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it. Again, I'm trying to keep it as cool as I can. If it starts heating up, I just transition to another section, polish that area, and then come back to it if I need to. Again, I'm looking here for the micro scratches underneath that magnifying glass. The white scratches were gone. So it did end up removing the white compound scratches, and there was not any of the blue scratch left, or there was no micro scratches or micro cuts from the blue compound, and it seemed to polish up pretty good. There's still some blue compound that's left around the surface, so I'm going to end up cleaning that up a little bit. But again, I'm just looking for defects and see if I can see anything. So I brought it back to the other section of my workshop. I ended up cleaning it up a little bit further, and now I'm just taking a look at it with my naked eye. I don't see any of the micro scratches or any defects in the sealer at all. So I think overall it turned out pretty well. And for the answer to the question of can you end up wet sanding and polishing spar urethane without melting or burning it through, yeah, you can, in my opinion. And I think it turned out pretty well. So I really thank you guys for watching, and I hope it helps out. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.